studying and living and working in the US as a foreign alien. I'm happy to now hold dual citizenship in the US and Ghana. As many of you can imagine, that makes a significant difference in the experience navigating the labor market in the US. And so with that, I will pass it over to Dr. Iffy.
Thank you so much, Gloria. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. I actually been looking forward to this for a while. I met Emmanuel a few months ago, and I think the African Bridge Network is an amazing opportunity that I wish I had access to when I first came back to the US in 1993. So I was actually born in the US. My family relocated to Nigeria when I was 7 years old. So I did all of my early education and college and medical school in Nigeria. And I came back to the States in 1995, and then did my postgraduate clinical training in pediatric hematology, oncology, and bone marrow transplant, and my master's in public health here in the US. I'm a physician by training. I did clinical medicine for a very long time, and I, in the past 2 years, moved into the life sciences industry, first as the chief patient officer for Forma Therapeutics, a biotech in Boston, Massachusetts, actually Watertown. And then a year ago, we were acquired by Novo Nordisk. So now I'm the chief patient officer for Novo Nordisk Rare Disease. I live in New Jersey, but I report to Zurich, which is where the rare disease is headquartered. So it's great to be here, and I do see at least one other face of somebody I know. Inshallah, how are you? Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too, Ma.
All right. So thank you, Dr. Iffy. I've also been really looking forward to this conversation with you, for many reasons, right? The obvious being that we're working in similar spaces. And I know we have a really diverse representation with regards to background. When I was thinking about preparing for this conversation, I was really selfish and thinking about my career and my career development and getting to engage with Dr. Iffy. However, I am going to be very, very considerate of everyone and try to steer this conversation in a way that is helpful for all of us. And so we can get started with the conversation, Dr. Iffy, and I'd like to hear a little more about the genesis of your journey in the US. So you were born, but moved back to Nigeria. I'm not sure what age that was. You could tell us about that, what it was like growing up in Nigeria, why you went into medicine, and then what brought you back to the country of your birth.
Excellent questions. And so I was born in New York. My parents actually met in Nigeria. My mom moved to London. My dad came to the States for school. And then my mom moved here and they got married in New York. So my parents had all their children in New York, but this was in the 70s, the late 60s and the 70s, when racism was really, really bad. And my dad was the first son of a large family of 50 children. And he couldn't take the dichotomy in terms of he's like the biggest fish in the pond he came from. And then in America, he's like, they're throwing tomatoes at him. So he got tired and he left in 1976. And my mom stayed on for 2 more years and then took us all back in 1978. So that's why we left. I don't think my mom had any plans of leaving, but my dad, she had 5 children and she was raising them by herself. So we went back to Nigeria. When I did elementary school in Nigeria, I did medical school in Nigeria. And the plan was always to come back to the States to live. We were American citizens, we were Nigerian citizens, but we were more American than Nigerian. Living in Nigeria, people laughed at us because we had an accent. We talked funny, we walked funny, and we tried so hard to fit in, right? And I finally learned the language. I learned to be as, obnoxious as most of my colleagues were around me. And then my sister first moved back to the States, and then the younger ones came back, and I was the only one left. And when I was done, there was no reason for me to be there. I came back in 1995, and then my mom joined us in 1997. So we're all here now. Why did I go into medicine? I was a very sick or sickly child. I had asthma, I had food allergies, and I remember there was a night in the early mid 70s when I was really sick with asthma, and I thought I was going to die. And I remember this elderly white male physician came to our house, took care of me, took me to his clinic the next day, and somehow I got better, and I thought it was like magic. And so in my mind, I wanted to do what he did because I literally thought I was going to die. And so going back to Nigeria I was going to be a doctor. My mom is a nurse. My dad was a medical lab tech. And somehow in the family, that's all we all talked about was medicine. So I have an older sister who's a physician, OBGYN. I'm an oncologist. My younger two sisters are geriatrics and internal medicine. I had another sister who ended up passing away when I was 16, and she was also in medical school. And so
Sorry.
I think we all wanted to be in the medical field. My mom was a very, very active nurse. She was a public health nurse, and her work was public health education about sickle cell disease. It was vaccinations, cholera, and malaria prophylaxis, and she would take the kids with her when she went on her public health campaigns. So I was around this growing up. It was all about healthy behavior, healthy choices, and treating diseases. My first job after high school was in a pharmacy at a local hospital. And then the next job was in the kitchen at a local hospital. That's all we knew. So it was almost like meant to be. And of course, when you're in medical school in Nigeria, you see sickle cell, you see malaria, and you see other things. And that's kind of how I ended up going the route of being very, very interested in sickle cell disease. When I came back to the States, though, it's not a big thing. Sickle cell is not a big thing in America. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do cancer. But cancer was hard to do. Sickle cell came so easy that I didn't even think about it as a job. And when you get your first job out of fellowship and you're given a sickle cell clinic to run and you do it easily, that just becomes your natural path. And so that's kind of how I went into medicine. It's been in my blood. In my family, all we talk about is medicine. We have so many physicians and healthcare people in the family that we don't know anything else. So I feel kind of lucky that I didn't have to kind of struggle to figure out what I wanted to do when I grew up. I kind of knew.
That's so interesting to hear, because growing up in Ghana, I was also a very sickly child. I'm actually a rare disease patient survivor. And so medicine was something I always aspired to do. And I moved into the US, I was 18 for college. And what I found in my experiences here with a mix of challenges and opportunities was just different pathways to have impacts within healthcare in a space. And I've always wondered to myself why I never followed through with medical school and took the path I took. And hearing your story, one thing that was different was I was not immersed in that environment. So there weren't medical doctors in my family, and I don't think I really had that, personal experience to appreciate and to stick through what it is. But I really, really respect the grit and the resilience for the process, right? I was looking up your experience, and it's really fantastic what it is you've had to just how you've advanced through to a global C-suite level, which for me is a big deal being in this industry and just knowing that, like you said, sickle cell is not really a big deal. You don't hear much of it. It's considered rare in the US, but in our parts of the world, it is such a common phenomenon that, that was just a little bit of it was a little mind-boggling for me to wrap around why there weren't significant advancements. But we see that now, and I just want to really recognize your work in championing for sickle cell, the sickle cell community. I know you call yourself sickle cell warriors. Um, So let's get into, you talked a bit about the cultural adaptations. It was actually very interesting for me to hear that Nigeria didn't feel as, didn't feel comfortable or home from a cultural perspective. You stood out, and so you always wanted to move into the US. But when you came or you arrived, what did you find for cultural shocks? Surprisingly, I'm sure.
A big shock. It was like ice cold water washed
Yeah.
me from head to toe.
Yeah.
The first thing, Gloria, is I came in June. I
Uh-huh.
was so cold. It was so flipping cold in New York in June. I couldn't believe it. I used to wear two pairs of jeans, a sweater, and a jacket in the summer. It was the difference in temperature was ridiculous.
Oops.
So
Yeah.
that made me miserable. That was the first shock.
That's the first one. Yeah.
The shock is the way people dressed boggled my mind. I grew up in New York and I came back to New York City and people were walking around half naked. I was completely traumatized.
And
I
then in the
was
cold.
completely traumatized. This bikini top and you got to understand, I'm not my family wasn't extremely religious, but
Mm.
women had to dress a certain
There's
way.
still conservatism.
You
Yes.
don't walk around with, spaghetti strap, belly button showing. As a matter of fact, you wore long skirts and wearing pants was like a no-no in my culture, even though us American kids, we wore pants because that's all we knew how to wear. But you had to dress, you had to cover everything. And in America, I came back and people had everything hanging out. I was like, oh my God. That was the second thing. And then the third
Yeah.
thing was I was a physician and I
Mm.
had already done a year of internship and worked for 6 months in a hypertension clinic. I
Mhm.
couldn't find a job.
Wow.
I tried to work as a pharmacy tech. I was taking my boards. They said I didn't have work experience in America. I tried working in a clinic. As I tried volunteering, I didn't have work experience. So after so many rejections, my sister said, why don't you just become a home health aide and do that? And so I became, and in Nigeria, before I went to medical school, my mother ran a training program for LPNs, the licensed practical nurses. I did the training and I was one of her faculty members who helped teach the people in the class. So I did the home health aid training, I don't know, 6 weeks. And so my first job in America as a physician, okay, was actually, no, my first job was in McDonald's. It was in McDonald's. And because I couldn't get a job and I was like so desperate to get a job. So I went to
Yeah.
McDonald's, oh, you need to be a server. I'm like, fine, I can serve. 3 days I lasted. I was cleaning and somebody bumped into me and my glasses flew into the fryer and I quit. I left my money, I left the job and I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. And I was so traumatized. I'm like, okay, fine, I'll go do home health aid. So I did the home health aid and my first client was this 60-year-old woman with COPD who was a smoker. And I had asthma. And I had to stay in her house for 4 hours every day. And she smoked and I almost died. Luckily for me, the next client they gave me was an older woman who just needed a companion to take her to her doctor's appointments, and she just needed to talk to somebody. So I was able to spend 4 hours with her every day. In between appointments, I would read from my boards. I did that job for about a year. And then after that, I got a job as a research volunteer at my sister's hospital through her connections.
Mm.
And there was no money. I literally volunteered 6 months of my time to do a research study with this guy. But I got a amazing letter of recommendation from him. It was one of the sweetest things. And when I was done, he gave me $300 out of his own personal funds. I don't think it was part of the grant. He took us to dinner in his house. I met his family. And that was how I got my recommendation to go into my public health master's degree at Johns Hopkins University. So I went from not being able to get a job, not being able to work in America, to getting into Hopkins. And I think that was the single most transformative thing in my resume. So everything
Mm.
after that was like, oh, she's finished from Hopkins. And I was like, I had a great degree before I went to Hopkins, but oh well. But it was really the lack of recognition of all the training we did back at home. I knew I was a really good doctor,
Mm.
but nobody here believed that I was a really good doctor or that I had any qualifications to actually contribute to the medical community in America. And that was a huge disappointment.
Mm. That's I'm listening, and I in in engaging with many people with a similar story. I hear that. And I can't directly relate to it, but I can definitely empathize, because I grew up in, in a community where medical doctors were really the, you know, with, they were the top of the crop. They were the most respected, um, you know, parts of our citizenry. And to come to the US and have to take on these menial, humbling jobs, what does that do to you psychologically, and how do you
Oh, oh.
overcome that or persevere through that?
And to put it in context, I
Yeah.
had never cleaned in my life.
Wow.
I was a sickly child who got an asthma attack from being in the kitchen, from hearing people, if you spray perfume, I get sick. If there's dust, I get sick. So they didn't let me do anything as a kid. So I got to America as a physician, and I'm working in McDonald's, and I think I got depressed. I was
Mm.
extremely depressed. My sister, who was doing her residency, she was like, get up and go look for a job. And I'm like, look, forget that thing. I'm not any job in America. It took me a while. I think what helped me was I was living with my sister, my older sister, my younger sister, and there was a very strong Nigerian community of doctors who were all residents at Monty in New York at the time. And they kept on trying to encourage me, don't worry, don't worry. We all went through that. You can do it, you can do it. And they'll give me different ideas of what to do. And when I finally got the research assistant position, I think it really helped kind of smooth that ego that, how can I be a physician and top of my class? I mean,
Mhm.
nobody would believe I worked at McDonald's when I tell my classmates. They're like, "Oh, I'm like, but it was something I wasn't really proud to share until much later that I was like, you know what? People are going
You've
through this. They need
overcome
to
it.
see that I
Yes, you've
overcame it.
overcome
Yeah,
it.
but
Yeah.
it was quite humbling.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot of humility to
Mm.
go through that. And I know
Yes.
people who refuse to go through it. Like my dad, he left America because he couldn't do
Yeah.
it.
That's interesting.
You know?
Yeah. Coming back to that.
And and he was like, "What do you mean you're working?" He was this macho Nigerian man, right? Like you don't
Yeah.
know, my child does not do this, and but I was like, it's either that or I don't have a job, I don't have food to contribute to the family, I don't move forward. I'm sitting at home all day doing nothing but studying. Like I needed
Mm.
to move my life forward.
Mm.
And the fact that you have no American work experience, even for residency, it's a negative.
Mm.
And so my sister was like, you have to do something. When she came, she was lucky to be able to work in my cousin's clinic as a volunteer. But my
Mm-hmm.
cousin had moved to Tennessee, and so it was not an option. And we
Mm.
didn't know anybody in New York I could work with. And so she said, okay, do a master's in public health, which I wanted to do anyway. So that kind of worked out. But the
Yeah.
funny thing that she told me was I applied to 5 different universities: Hopkins, Yale, Harvard, Boston University as a backup, and Columbia.
Mm.
I got into Boston University. I didn't get into Harvard. I didn't get into Yale. And I was so desperate to sign with BU. She said no. And I was
Wow.
angry. She said, don't go to Boston University. Let's wait and see if Hopkins or Columbia comes through. Columbia came through and they said no. She said, don't go to BU. Let's wait for Hopkins. And finally, Hopkins came through as a yes. I had like one day to decide if I was going to go to BU. And she was like, if you have an Ivy League on your resume, that will open more doors than if you had a regular university. And I didn't really understand it until
Yeah.
I was applying for residency. And so sometimes the
Mm.
choices you make of what to do
Mm.
are important to kind of open up the next phase of your career. And
Yeah.
having Johns Hopkins University on my resume is probably the most transformative thing. And I think I've said this before. It was a lot of money. Okay. We had to take school loans, and I'm still trying to pay them off even today. But but it opened so many doors for me, like for residency, for fellowship, job applications. Oh, you're a
Mm.
Hopkins grad. People seem to think that having that on your resume makes you like some sort of superstar. And I
Mm.
personally don't think so, but that's society for you in
That's just the
America.
society, yes. Yeah. And it's so important that you're sharing this piece. I mean, well, first takeaway for me, in terms of how the resilience through that, humbling experience was the support system you had around you. And so if that's a takeaway for myself or for anyone listening is really be intentional about curating a support system that reminds you of who you are, the value you know you bring. It's not determined by the job you're doing, just to remind you of your ambition and your aspiration, and that you had a sister that had experience, had studied the system, and could give that experience to you. I'm the firstborn, and so I find myself doing that for my younger siblings is, things like, you want to go to this school or not this school, or you want to take on this degree course, like, do a STEM, don't do this, right?
Mhm.
But, like, how would you how would you encourage myself and those of us here who may not have this level of intelligence, I'll call it, right? This intel,
Mhm.
to get that intel.
One of the beautiful things about immigrants is that we tend to support each other in community. So,
Yes.
unbeknownst to me, there's a Nigerian physicians community in the
Mm.
US. There's a Ghanaian physicians community. There's a Cameroonian physicians community. There's the Nigerian lawyers community. My husband is an attorney. He belongs to the lawyers community. And then there's the village community. So the village that I belong to, we have a community in every state in the country, and we
Wow.
meet once a month to support each other. And through those communities, you find people who are like-minded. And sometimes you come to another country and you want to stay by yourself because you know the bad about your people. And so you want to stay away from the gossips and but you have to find a part of your community or a community that you can bond with, right?
Mm.
If you don't have your specific community, find a group of people who represent your demographic. Like when I was a resident, all the foreign medical graduates hung out together because we all had to
Mm.
take USMLE. We all knew about how people measured us compared to American grads. So we formed a network amongst ourselves to provide each other with intel on different opportunities. I'm not into ID, but I have a friend who's an ID doctor. I'll tell my other colleague who's thinking about doing ID fellowship, we'll talk to this person. You
Mm.
have to pay it forward and give it back, but don't
Yeah.
try to be an island. I was a very
Mm.
introverted, secluded kind of person. And I was lucky that my sister and my cousins were already in medicine to kind of help guide me. And I had to respect them because culturally you listen to your elders. But many people don't have siblings or cousins or family members who are in the field.
Right.
You have to think, okay, who can I trust? Who will give me the truth? And so you want to start with your cultural community or some other demographic that you fit into, either foreign medical grads or immigrants in your geographic network. You got to find some group to belong to, and you may get burned. Don't give up. Try another group and another group. I mean, I've been in groups where they screw you, and that's okay. Go to another group, right? I've gotten mad with the Nigerian doctors, and I left them for 5 years, and then now I'm back with the group again.
Oh, that's
But
funny.
there's a value in being with like-minded people who can validate your experience and also
Mm.
validate, what you're trying to do. And you do learn the good and the bad. So
Mm.
I think if I didn't belong to that network, it would have been extremely hard to move forward because you don't know
Mm.
everything. And then the other thing I want to tell folks is if you figured it out, you have a responsibility to help the person coming behind you
Great.
because it's hard for all of us and it's going to be harder
Yes.
and harder. I don't want people coming behind me to have to go through what I went through.
Yes.
Because in my career, and we may not have enough time to go into all this, I went through hell.
Mm.
Because not only did I do medicine, I did hematology, then I went into sickle cell disease. It's not sexy, there's no money in it, nobody cares, there's no funding, you're on your own. And I have
Mm.
friends who went into neonatology, neurosurgery, dermatology, they're all doing well. And they're like, why are you in sickle cell disease? That's such a dead end, specialty. And
Mm.
so going through that specialty, it was a different kind of struggle. And I had to find like-minded sickle cell people who supported me through it. And when things get bad, we all have a little support group meeting at the conferences to kind of lift each other up. But it's a struggle. But don't forget where you came from. Pull somebody up behind you, and always look to who else is in your net in this environment that you can kind of support or who can support you. You cannot do
Mm.
this by yourself because
Right.
the rules keep changing. So
Yes.
in 1995, we had one set of rules. Now the rules are different. I don't even know
Mm.
what it takes to go from being an immigrant physician now getting into specialty training and things like that. So you got to keep updated as to what's going on. And so I
Right.
think networking, find a community is really, really important. I know some people have a hard time doing that
Yeah.
because not every community is welcoming, but you really need to find a community.
Yeah, I really, really appreciate, first of all, the jewels and the gems. I hope everyone is hearing that. Find your community. And I'll take this opportunity to actually give a plug for the Life Sciences Professional Immigrant Professional Network. And it came, Dr. Iffy, this also came from a place of feeling isolated myself within the life sciences industry. I don't have experience in medicine, but I just, broken into, very difficult experience. We can get into that, but breaking into the life sciences industry, didn't even know it existed. I found out through my graduate study and having to knock on different doors. It's a heavily European, quite
Mhm.
European space. Like you mentioned, you're reporting into, Zurich. And so trying to connect with people, getting in, knowing how you probably are perceived, dealing with all of these, the imposter syndromes, everything that has been labeled that, people of color or immigrants go through in such spaces where you're a minority. And I was curious to know how to navigate the space with others who shared a similar background, which is why I'm partnering with ABN, and really happy to have this conversation and bring this to the larger community. That's really key. So find your community, everyone. That's really important. I like that you shared that even when, because people are people, even when there are breaches or interpersonal struggles. It's okay to take a break, but just keep that essential principle that community is important and support is important. So now I'm going to ask you, we've established that for you, having community of people with similar shared background and experiences where was helpful. Now, how are you navigating being in a space and networking with people, building professional networks with people who are not, from a similar background? Like you mentioned, sickle cell disease, for example, that wasn't the hot thing before. Even now, I know that, there are struggles to get funding. I've heard some pharma companies pulling out of certain markets and all of that piece, right? How are you how are you just holding your own and advancing in a space that is not home for you, that doesn't look like you?
It takes time. So the
Okay.
first thing I want to let people know is that don't expect to get good at it overnight.
Mm,
But I have one of my mentors when I was working at Emory. I was at Emory for 10 years. And I
mm,
came in right out of my first faculty job, and then that was my second faculty job. And I was Nigerian, okay?
mm.
Hot-tempered, impatient. If I don't like you, you will know I don't like you. If you don't like me, I will let you know that I know you don't like me. And everything was very transparent. I was very, because in my culture, if you pretend you like me, you're like a witch. Okay, that's witchcraft. We believe in put your card on the table and let it be very clear. And so if things are not going well, I did not know what politically correct meant.
Mm.
That was out of my vocabulary. I was blunt, I was direct, and I was goal oriented. I came into Emory with that personality, and let's just say I had like a couple of concussions,
Good way to put it.
and I had this colleague who joined Emory. He's a Ghanaian, Solomon Oforiakwa. He came to Emory, and he took me on as his mentee, and he said, he's saying, well, look, you have to learn how to manage the intangibles.
Hmm.
And every week I would meet with him and he would say the same thing. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, what intangibles am I managing? Like, what are you talking about? This is happening at that. He says, no, 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 no. You have to learn how to manage the intangibles. And he grew up in London. So he had a very crisp British accent. And he worked with me for like 5 or 6 years. And over the course of time, I realized what he meant by managing the intangibles.
Mm,
We have a culture as Nigerians or Africans that is one way, and then there's an American culture.
mm,
And the concept of networking, relationship building, from being promoted in any field, whether it's medical or non-medical, it
yes.
has nothing to do with how good you are in your specialty. You
Yes.
can be a rocket scientist and get a Nobel Prize and nobody cares.
Mm,
You are measured on how much people like you, how much they feel comfortable around you, how they feel that you communicate in a way that they understand, and how amiable you are, even when you don't agree with them. It's all about how you make them feel. And that was the hardest lesson for me to understand. I was like, I am, denying my values. This is not what I was brought up with. I don't understand. How can she be, she said, I looked at her and I looked like I was mad, then I'll get in trouble. And I'm like, that's my facial features. So I had to learn how to manage the intangibles. And it included 3 rounds of professional coaching to fix me so that they didn't have
wow.
to fire me. Oh, yeah. I mean, I say I got concussions. I'm not playing.
Okay.
I got concussions.
Yeah.
The first one was that I am too abrasive to the team people. I'm very demanding. So I
Mm,
got coaching for that. Then the second one was I say I instead of we. Because if I do the work, I want you to know that I did the work and you didn't help me with the work and your name doesn't need to be on the work. So I had to learn about how to be a we person. I'm like, okay. And then the third one was, I don't know, I write emails in bold, capital, underline, and red to prove my point. That's a no-no in corporate America. And so after I had to learn, I actually had to practice how to look in front of the mirror, even when I'm mad, smile, and try to tone down my emotional response to what's happening and be very calm in how I deliver a negative message with a smile. And I learned the sandwich method. You put the good news and then the bad news and then the good news on top, and how to be, yeah. It made me puke for a while, but now it's become second nature to me. I can give you the same message, but you won't get hurt. Your feelings will get hurt by me giving you the message. And it's something that we are not trained to do in Africa. I don't know. I'm probably India. We're very alike in the India subcontinent and Africa. I don't know about Europe, but I know that in most colored communities, Black and brown communities, we are not taught the softer skills of communicating, the softer skills of leadership. And that is how you succeed. You cannot get a job or get a promotion if you are boom, 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 and you're Black. It just doesn't work. You can do it if you're not Black and you're of a certain religious persuasion, but if you're immigrant, a minority religion, a minority gender, a minority affiliation, sexual wise, don't even try it because it's not going to work. And it took me 10 years to figure this out.
yeah. Oh,
And then
wow.
another 10 years to kind of learn how
Uh,
to finesse the thing. I mean, because if you do something to me, for example, you steal my project and put your name on it and get it published, how am I nice about that when I find out? It's so hard to be nice. But I
yeah.
had to learn to, Gloria, I noticed that, this poster was published. It was my project, but I see that my name is not on the project. I'm sure it was a miscommunication or a misunderstanding. Can you help me understand, how this happened? And, maybe we can figure out a win-win for both of us to solve this situation. Meanwhile, what I want to do is punch you in the face. Okay. But I
That is
had to
going to take
learn.
years
I
to
had to
master.
learn. I had to
Yeah.
learn how to master that. I had to learn how to coach people who are underperforming, even though this is patient care and people can die. I had to learn how not to take anything personal when people act stupid. Don't take it personal. It's not about you. I had to learn how to hire people. They're incompetent, but I can't fire them. And so I had to learn how to work around things like that. You have to learn the softer skills of the community that you live in. If you're going to thrive in this country and this culture, you have to learn what do they value, how do they operate, and how do you adapt yourself to that functioning.
Yeah.
And without losing who you are. I mean, I'm still iffy. I'm still quite a very direct person. But I've learned how to couch my direct feedback in a way that is more palatable. I mean, I don't always succeed.
Mhm.
But for the most part, I think anytime I make progress in my career is because I've mastered some of this in that environment and I'm able to move to the next level. When I don't master it, I kind of keep going over and over and over the whole different problem with the same root, right? Until I figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah. I do want to give people time for, questions. So I guess, a question I have for you, I mean, you've had to master, right? And I think what I want to say to everyone is please take notes now. Cultural intelligence, emotional intelligence,
Extremely important.
start learning those pieces. Like you said, from our part of the world, we can put such emphasis on the hard skills and the technical knowledge and forget that this is also a critical, probably the more important aspect to nail if you want to advance in the
Yep.
US. And so I hope everyone is taking notes of that. For a lot of folks here we saw on the graphs that Maddie shared who are new. They're trying to get in, whether it's to get into get a job, get into grad school, get into residency, and are immigrants. What strategies have you found to be, the most effective with regards to just penetrating, being able to persevere to penetrate into something?
So I'm going to mention three things and not necessarily in any particular order.
Right.
One, you have to be resilient. I think you mentioned this earlier.
Yes.
You have to have grit and make a decision. Is this what you want? And how much do you want it?
Mm-hmm.
And how much are you willing to invest and commit to be able to get it? Because it's not going to come easy. Nobody hands you anything on a silver platter. You will have to push, fight, struggle, scrap, and push for it, right? So that's the first thing. If you're not resilient, you have to figure out how to build resiliency. Otherwise, it's going to be it's going to be difficult. It will be harder if you don't have resiliency. That's the first thing. Second thing, if you're shy, introverted, or afraid of talking to people, you're going to have a really hard time because you must find a way to network and reach out to people without being obnoxious, but in a way to not just get mentoring, but to build an expansive network to get information. Because I think the biggest issue we had is information is not readily available to us.
Yeah.
I used to be, I was a very nosy child, which is why I ended up in medical school. I used to read everything I saw, whether it was my mail or nobody's. I checked the fax machine. I don't know if I want to advise you to do this, but I knew what was going on with other people because I was snoopy. I paid attention. I looked, I listened, I asked a lot of questions. I was that person who would show up in a meeting and like, oh, that's the wrong meeting, but okay, I'm not doing anything else. I'll just stay. Listen, because I just want to know. And I would ask, and I wasn't afraid of talking to anybody. But so why did you do it this way? Tell me, help me understand. Oh, so how did you get that done? And you never know where you're going to get the right intel to lead you to where you can get resources. The third thing is invest in yourself. I was not a fan of spending $40,000 on a master's degree at Johns Hopkins. But I probably, again, that's the most impactful investment I have made in my life, right? And I would encourage anybody but invest smart. Getting an MBA from an online university is useless. Invest in an MBA from a reputable, preferably Ivy League institution, because just being a member of that community is worth the money you paid, whether you learn anything or not. So you need to invest in yourself. I actually did a course on it's like a Harvard mini MBA course. I paid for it myself. I did a training on communication and public speaking with John Maxwell. I paid for it myself. And I was already a good speaker, but it helped me elevate my speaking to a different level. Right. And I understood some of the tricks of the trade that people never teach you, like how to prepare for a talk and how to prepare your slides and how to navigate an audience of people who are against you versus for you. I attended conferences. I did a women leadership in medicine at Harvard 2 years in a row. I went the first year. I took my sister the second year. We all went because I knew that we needed to figure out how to navigate the space of the next level in academia, right? We were already, I was a professor, my sister was a professor, but it was not at the same level of exposure as everybody else. And just going to the conference opened up a chance for me to meet the program director. I got her a gig to speak somewhere. She got me a gig to speak somewhere else. And then next thing you know, I'm getting gigs to speak in different places because of that exposure. And so sometimes we have to see the value of networking. I go to the golf tournaments with the people in the C-suite, even though I don't play golf. I can barely spell golf. I don't like golf, but I go, right?
Yeah.
If there's an after hours mixer, go show your face, talk to one or two people, get a card or two, and follow up. I never valued LinkedIn, but LinkedIn is a powerful networking tool. And you may not know who's going to respond to you, but somebody will. I've met people who I've invited to give talks for me, and once they give a talk, they have me give a talk for them. You just never know. So networking, resiliency, and investing in yourself. That's how you break into the system. But if you sit down in one place and think it's going to come to you, yeah, not going to happen.
That is, I'm wowed. Thank you so much. I've learned so much. And it's, I think, things that I've picked in my over 12 years career in the US, but just really hearing and emphasizing, I'm an introverted, shy person. I'm sure some friends would not believe that, but I am. And really learning how to get comfortable with putting myself out there, and just want to encourage everyone. It's challenging. So that's where the resilience comes, is you just have to keep trying. It has to be really important to you if you want to make impact in the US workplace. And so thank you so much, Dr. Iffy. I know there's a networking session in 4 minutes, and I'm looking to see if there are any questions in the chat, but is there anyone? I want to be generous. And if there's anyone who has a question for Dr. Iffy before we close and break into networking. All right, I see Gloria Santos is up. Okay.
Hi,
Hello.
Gloria.
Hi, Dr.
Hello,
Iffy,
Gloria.
thank you so much. What a powerful talk. Thank you. I have a quick question. Based on what you're saying about learning the soft skills of what is expected, how this professional culture works, how, as an immigrant, how do we give our pitch? Because, for example, myself, briefly, I came from Brazil. I left everything behind, to try it here for more. I left even everything, family, everything, to try it out here. And we are fortunate to find, for example, an institution like an ABN, but sometimes we have to move forward and talk to the decision makers. How do we give our pitch without all the heaviness, which it means, to leave your country behind, trying a new life in a new country? And how do we give this pitch to these decision makers that might help us in our professional path?
So I have
I
two
don't know if I
things.
was clear.
No, you were clear. I have two things I would recommend. There are online LinkedIn communication courses or YouTube videos that you can watch about how to make a pitch. And then you have to practice, 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 practice. Write it out, say it to yourself, record yourself, watch. I did a course where I recorded what I was going to say. I watched it. I noticed some things I didn't like. I did it again. I did it again. I did it again. And so you never give a pitch without being prepared. So you need to say, what is your pitch going to be? Short, sweet, no more than a minute or two. Write it out, record it, and really do it over and over again so that you are crisp. And if you do it so much, the heaviness won't come through. But if you're speaking on the fly, your emotions come through, and Americans don't like emotions. They can't handle it. Us immigrants are very emotional people, and people misinterpret that emotion in a negative way. It's our really passion, right? It's so important to you, but they don't see it that way. They see it as, oh, she's too needy. I don't want to deal with that. So you have to practice, and you have to look and make sure that the tone you want to show is what comes out by the time you're ready to give your pitch.
And always focusing on being liked and always focusing on understanding what the professional values are, correct?
Yep. 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 Yep.
Tough
Keep it
job.
simple. Yep. Keep it simple.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Welcome.
Yes.
Yvonne had
Yes,
her hand up.
Yvonne. Yes.
Hello, good evening. This is a very lovely panel, and I've really enjoyed the discussion so far. Hello, Dr. Ife. Hello, Gloria. I am so glad I joined this meeting because Dr. Ife, you are so practical. Never met somebody as pragmatic and as practical as you are in this, in the corporate industry. What you shared with us has been a treasure for me. I'm going to keep remembering all that you've said. Things as humbling as having to lay down your professional, cap and then pick up, an apron at
It was
McDonald's.
hard though. It was very hard. I hated it.
And sharing how you felt about it, I think it's a real treasure. And giving us an idea of how personality issues can come up with your work, telling us how strong you are and how you still have to find a way of, adapting to the work environment. I think that is incredible. Thank you so much. I've learned so much just listening to you. I just want to know, you seem to have had a very great, fulfilling career as a hematologist, as a doctor, and then now currently you are in the life sciences or in pharma. I'm just wondering, is this some opportunity that just met you on the way, or this is just how you planned it?
It wasn't how I planned it. No, not at all. I never, ever, ever thought I would work full-time in pharma at all. But from a very early time, when I finished my fellowship in 2003, I was talking to somebody at Novartis about a slide deck they were using to teach us about iron overload. And I just talked about how I hated the deck, how it wasn't teaching us anything. It was ugly, and I gave them all these recommendations on what to do to fix it. And that was how I began consulting for industry. And so I was a consultant for industry from 2003 up until 2021. And I was offered a job in industry. It wasn't my first job offer. It wasn't my second job offer, but it was the job offer that allowed me to do what I really wanted to do, which is global sickle cell disease. And it was one of those things that it just kind of happened. And I was doing the things that I liked. Running my mouth, teaching, research, sickle cell disease, Africa. Like, I was like, okay, where do I sign? And at that point, my medical career, I had reached the top of where I couldn't get any higher in academia unless I went into hospital administration, which I didn't want to do. And I didn't want to go to another place and start from scratch. And, so to me, the career options were global or go into get an MBA and then do something completely different. And that it just kind of happened that I got this opportunity. So it wasn't what I thought about, but I think my experiences over the past 30 years allowed the opportunity to find me because I had everything they needed. Plus I was Nigerian. Plus I had a very big network in Africa and around the world in sickle cell disease. Plus I was an amazing sickle cell expert, no shade. And they knew that, right? And so everything I had done led up to that opportunity. But it was not on my radar at all. I was like, no.
All right, thank you so much for sharing that. Just to chip in quickly, I am also a sickle cell doctor. I have a foundation in sickle cell, and I seem like to be towing the same path. So I hope to get some more time to interact with you after today.
Please, absolutely. Please reach out. Yes. And Bira, I think we may have time for one more question, I guess.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was really a very nice talk. I mean, it's been really amazing for me to join this talk show, which I wasn't actually sure what I was gonna hear from you, but it's really humbling and very humble beginning, but I can't believe what you have achieved. And I'm just looking forward to I just feel like I wish I could be you. Yeah.
You can.
Because whatever you said, it's kind of relatable. So, but I'm just talking because I have like a master's degree in public health, but I also have a gap And everywhere, like I'm trying to apply, they're like, oh, you have that gap. When I graduated, I didn't work. And that is the gap I'm talking about. So it's, yeah, that is why I'm struggling with that. So how would you help somebody to bridge that gap?
You need to craft your story about that explains the gap. I'm sure in that gap, you may not have worked, but you did something. And it's all about how you tell the story. Okay? I tell people, if you volunteered in your church, if you volunteered at the market or the Barakwa meeting, or you did anything that has to do with anything that has to remotely look like the work you're trying to do, put it on there. And you tell the story about how this gap allowed you to achieve X, Y, Z, and now you're coming back into the workforce for this particular reason. And what you gained in life experience is going to make you a better person for the role you're going for. Okay? Now, you may need to do some other certification to kind of show that you're still current in the science and in the current literature, whatever, but you can tell a story about the gap, and it's how you tell the story. One of the things I needed to mention before we leave is it's all about how you tell your story. Hi, my name is Ify Osunkwo. I'm a hematologist, and I do sickle cell disease. That's one story. Hi, my name is Dr. Ify Osunkwo. I'm a world-renowned sickle cell expert with 25 years experience taking care of sickle cell patients in America, in Africa, and in Europe. And my goal is to XYZ, 2 different spins on the same person, right? It's how you verbalize it. But you need to believe that you need to write out all the things you've done, and then you need to read them and remind yourself of how wonderful you are. Immigrants have the best of both worlds because you see in America, but you've seen another country. Most Americans have never left America. So you come with a global perspective. You've seen poverty, you've seen richness, you've seen all types of the ecosystem, whatever field you're in, and you're now in America to see the American version of it. You bring knowledge and expertise that they can't even dream of bringing in. But you have to believe that there's a value in it. It's all about how you talk about yourself. I tell people when you write your resume, write your bio, look at it, and then imagine the person that you want to be, write that person's bio, and then superimpose it. Because America, it's all about how you present yourself. We are very humble, but humility doesn't get you anywhere in America.
That's true.
Remember I said humility doesn't get you anywhere. Humility is not humility. We are too humble, right? It's different from humility. Humility is very different from humility. We don't want to talk about what we've done because we don't. No. Blow it up. Blow it up, because that's the language of this and this culture. Don't lie, but blow up what you've done and be very, very vocal and proud about what you've achieved. Honey, Copilot is great. I use Google Translator. Find a word that explains what you've done, and it's a glowing word. And use that word. Don't just say, I am this. No, I have, I did, I experienced, I innovated, I demonstrated, I investigated. Use words that amplify what you've done, because that's the language Americans understand.
Last one.
When I write you a letter of recommendation, right, you will get the job. The same resume, but somebody else will write the letter and you're like, who is this person? I'm using the same information, but I've learned the language that Americans understand in how I write my recommendation letters. This is Bira, who is an outstanding emerging rock star in the field of whatever. She has achieved this. She took this year's gap to do whatever, and she's come back to the workforce bigger and better than ever. And her work ethic is outstanding. Not good, but outstanding. She delivers on everything she says she's going to deliver on. She's on time. She's dedicated. Her passion translates to empathy, communication. You use the words that speak to how good you are. Please don't be shy, because shyness doesn't get you anywhere. You are as qualified, if not more, than anybody else looking for that same job. But you have to talk about it, you have to speak it, otherwise they won't know how good you are. Once you're in there, they value you because they see it. But you got to be able to speak it so that you can get in first. And I wish we could do another session on just how to present yourself and workshop to people. Tell me about yourself. Give me your elevator speech, and let's correct your elevator speech and show you how to talk about yourself in a way that would get you the job you want. But you're not only a nothing. You are. right? Don't do this. Stand like this. If I can tell you one thing I learned as an intern, they're like, oh, where'd you go to school? Where'd you go to school? Oh, you went to University of Nigeria. I'm like, yeah. Oh, I'm like, University of Nigeria is the preeminent university in Sub-Saharan Africa. And oh, by the way, I have an MPH from Johns Hopkins, and I was the first person in my graduating class of global. I mean, you talk about, you may have what they don't think is good, you blow it up and you tell them, okay, I also had this. What are you going to say about that? Right? And so you have to learn the language of the culture. Again, this is all part of, you have two people with the same GPA. How come one person is saying that they did all these things and then you can't speak about your own achievements? You have the same qualification. Don't downsell yourself. Immigrants typically downsell themselves. You got to upsell yourself.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I'm sure we all want to have another session or many more sessions. Dr. Iffy, we're definitely going to take you up on your offer for another session because there is a lot that we gain to learn from you. And before we wrap up, I just want to thank you, Dr. Iffy. I know being in the life sciences industry, I've been in pharma most of my career. And for you to take this time and just pour out very transparently and empower all of us and help us to believe in this. Emmanuel put there, your future self, this glowing future self. Thank you so much. It just speaks all the more to who you are. You deserve everything you've achieved and so much more. And we are looking forward to the impact that you're going to continue to have. You've already done great things, but I know that there's just so much more coming for you. And so thank you all for being present, for the comments, for the questions. And so I will close it here and hand over to Maddie or email.